Order, order. I call Alex Ballinger to move the motion.
Thank you, Dr Huck, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I beg to move that the House has considered government policy on NATO and the High Arctic. There's slightly fewer people here than I was expecting. I think we have a clash with the MOD estimates debate, which is a bit of a shame, but I'm delighted to see we have a brace of bootnecks in the debate today. I was hoping to see the Minister for the Armed Forces joining the debate, then we'd be nearly a fire team. Although I'll also note the member for Exmouth and Exeter East has just told me he's never been to Norway and therefore is not a proper bootneck. Al went earlier today, so maybe earlier this year, so maybe he's had his fill of the ice-breaking drills. Anyway, this debate is happening at the same time as the war in the Middle East, which not only reinforces the importance of naval assets as we see the impact of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz and on our economy at home, but it also impacts on the importance of naval air defence. And I'm pleased to see HMS Dragon joining the US task force in the Mediterranean very soon. The importance of the Navy cannot be understated in the Middle East, but it is even more important in the High North. That is because the High North is central to the UK's security, to its economic resilience and to NATO's ability to deter Russia. If we get our posture wrong, we don't just lose influence in the polar region, we take risks in the North Atlantic, take risks with our critical national infrastructure, and we risk our ability to reinforce our allies during a crisis. I will make 3 points in the debate today: why the High Arctic matters, what has changed in the recent past, and what NATO and the UK should be doing about it. The High Arctic matters because climate change is changing the geography. Receding ice is extending operating seasons, opening access and drawing in more strategic interest in shipping, minerals and energy. These create opportunities for states bordering the Arctic, but they also create risks. More access means more traffic means more accidents and more opportunities for coercion. Especially in a region with vast distances and limited infrastructure, the Arctic is becoming busier and more contested at the same time. Undersea competition is now a frontline issue. Our economy relies on seabed infrastructure, fibre optic communications, power cables and gas pipelines. But a single major incident to this critical undersea infrastructure can cause disruption beyond the immediate area. I will have to give way.
Can I thank the honourable member for giving way and for leading a debate on one of the most important security and defence issues that we face. I was in Estonia at the start of January in my role as chair of the APPG and met with them, members of their military as well as the British troops in Estonia to talk about the importance of the High North and Arctic. Does he agree with me that partnerships like GEF and indeed other work being done in the area is vital to protection of the undersea cables he absolutely correctly highlighted, and it's important we look for those kind of effective models to defend the High North and the Arctic?
I thank him for his intervention and absolutely agree that GEF is a vital alliance for our operations in the High North. I met with the Estonian ambassador only a couple of weeks ago, and we were pleased to discuss opportunities for cooperation, as well as UK forces that are based in Estonia as part of deterring the Russian threat to that part of the world. And importantly, the High Arctic is a top priority for Moscow, strategically, militarily and economically. Russia has been building up its military presence and is not subtle about it. The Northern Fleet is modernising, they have more capable navy, increasingly active submarine operations, and they focus on controlling access to the European High North. We should be clear about what that means for the UK. Russia's seabed nuclear forces are concentrated around the Kola Peninsula, and the High North is central to their nuclear deterrence strategy. This raises the stakes for NATO. The Royal Navy has also seen a 30% increase in Russian vessels threatening UK waters over the past 2 years. Their navy is increasingly capable and willing to test our defences from the High North. And Russia wants to exploit the Arctic for more than military leverage. It wants to dominate access to sea routes and mineral resources, and for them it's about economics and security, which is why we cannot treat the Arctic as competition, as just defence. But recently, the big change we've seen in this region is what's happening in Ukraine. Russia's invasion has transformed European security, and the Arctic is a part of that. 2 Arctic countries, Finland and Sweden, joined NATO because they concluded that neutrality in the context of Ukraine no longer protected them. And as a result, every Arctic country except Russia is now a NATO ally. That strengthens NATO's hand, but it also means NATO's northern responsibilities have expanded. The second development is Greenland, and we all saw Trump's threats and rhetoric, which has thankfully now receded. And I'm pleased that European countries were united in saying that Greenland's sovereignty should not be a bargaining chip. I will give way.
I'm very fortunate to visit Nuuk and Greenland with the APPG for Greenland, and of course we discussed NATO and Trump, and I think it's important for us to remember that the 1951 agreement between the USA and the Kingdom of Denmark gave the US rights of access to military defence. But when it comes to what this country, the United Kingdom, could be doing for Greenland to develop what will nonetheless be geosignificant into the future, it is time, surely, that we should be calling for a consulate for the United Kingdom in Greenland.
Thank you for the intervention. The Foreign Affairs Committee is going to Greenland in a couple of weeks, so we hope to meet with the Foreign Minister of Denmark and amongst other leaders of the Greenlanders. And that sounds like the kind of thing, sensible suggestion that we should be talking about. Certainly, there are lots of opportunities for NATO to base troops in Greenland already. We didn't need a change in sovereignty to do that. And I'm pleased to see that that has now fallen off the radar. But it is concerning that Trump's interest in Greenland is not a one-off, and US's security strategy is explicit that the Arctic is becoming more important to America and to American national security, whether that is because of Russia, China, geography, or for critical minerals. So we should not pretend that this is just a single passing storm. In the Arctic, NATO is responding, but we need to be honest about the scale of the task. With Arctic Sentry, the Alliance is trying to pull together a more coherent posture in the High North with better visibility, better coordination and a clearer framework for operating in the sea, air, space and undersea environment. We should also underline the importance of the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. This is a strategic choke point that is vital to NATO. It affects how Russia can move submarines into the wider Arctic. It affects the security of reinforcement routes in a crisis, and it sits alongside the undersea infrastructure that we rely on every day. And I will also raise the Joint Expeditionary Force, as my Scottish honorary friend raised earlier, with the UK-led JEF having real value in this part of the world. It is a practical, it is northern-focused, and it moves faster than the full NATO machine in the early stages of a crisis. That is exactly the sort of framework we should use to build readiness, interoperability and credibility. Thanks.
Good way. The honourable and gallant member is making a hoofing speech. Would he agree with me, though, that he mentioned the Greenland-Iceland gap? I know that we have committed to Operation Firecrest later this year, which will see the Carrier Strike Group go to the High North as a deterrent against the Russian Northern Fleet from breaking out of the Kola Peninsula across the Barents and into the open ocean. But with the emergence of the conflict in the Middle East, a potential commitment to a post-conflict force in Ukraine and also to troops in Norway and then Operation Firecrest, does he share my concern that we may have to make some very, very difficult decisions around how much capability we are actually able to deploy in order to make sure that our interests are looked after across all of those fronts?
Absolutely. The honourable member makes a good point. Our naval capability has diminished. Sadly, we have fewer destroyers and frigates than we used to have, and we are rightly deploying some of those to the Mediterranean and the Middle East at the moment. There will have to be hard choices as we approach that timescale, and it will depend, I think, on the situation in the Middle East at that point. But maybe the minister could address that later on in her remarks. And I'm actually going to raise later in the speech some things we might want to do about capability. Because it is important that NATO is backed by increased capability, shifts, aircraft, sensors, munitions, trained people and deployable logistics. Otherwise, our response will fall short. The First Sea Lord, he made this case for UK action in the High North repeatedly. And in recent speeches, he said the High North is a critical area. Russia's submarine force is a huge concern. And we need more war-fighting readiness now, not a peacetime posture. He also said the advantage that we have enjoyed in the Atlantic since the end of the Second World War is at risk unless we take action soon. So I want to ask the Minister if we are resourcing this crucial area sufficiently. We continue to retire Type 23 frigates, these anti-submarine ships, 5 of which have retired since 2021, including HMS Lancaster most frequently. Are we retiring these ships before replacements are ready? We've got the Type 31 programme coming on soon, but it would be nice to have reassurance on the timelines and the risks that we're taking if there are gaps here. And if we are relying on future ships for future threats, we need confidence that these ships will arrive before the threat does. We can't also talk about the High North without talking about the vital contribution of the Royal Marines, our Arctic trained troops, and who are ready to operate alongside Norwegian, Dutch and other forces. This is a genuine strength, but cold weather expertise must be backed by enablers, the lift, the sustainment and the surveillance assets. Which brings me to the most important point, the Defence Investment Plan. We can announce deployments, we can launch missions, we can make speeches about the High North, but without a clear investment plan, published, costed and credible, our adversaries will conclude that the UK's strategy is stronger in rhetoric than reality. The chairs of both the Defence Committee and the Public Accounts Committee have already warned that delay sends damaging signals to our adversaries, and they are right. If we are serious about the Arctic, we need serious choices, and we need them now, not in a year's time. And there is a practical day-to-day test here as well. We are facing concurrent pressures in other theatres, including recent deployments to the Middle East. And the question is not whether we can deploy ships to different regions on paper. The question is whether we can do it without hollowing out our commitments to other parts of the world. So I want to put three questions to the Minister. One, when will the Defence Investment Plan be published? Two, do we currently have sufficient ships suitable and available to operate credibly in the North Atlantic and respond to the serious crisis in the Middle East at the same time? And three, what steps is the government taking bilaterally and through NATO to reassure Denmark and strengthen stability around Greenland, while making clear that sovereignty is not negotiable and influence operations will be resisted? Dr. Huck, the High Arctic is becoming a sharper edge of competition. Climate change is opening access, Russia is militarising, undersea vulnerability is rising, and NATO is adapting. The UK has a choice. We can treat this as a niche theatre and muddle through, or we can treat it as what it is, a direct test of our seriousness as a North Atlantic power. Deterrence is built on credibility, credibility is built on capability, and capability requires investment. That is why the Defence Investment Plan matters, and that is why ship availability matters too. Thank you.
The question is, the House has considered government policy on NATO and the High Arctic. Can I remind members to bob if they're going to speak, and then we'll work out who is next, which is Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A real pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairship. Can I first of all thank the honourable gentleman for his own for leading today's debate and doing it in such a helpful way, setting the scene, setting the focus, setting the strategy, and asking questions that I was going to ask. But great minds think alike, and you have a greater mind than I have, by the way, just let you know that. Can I also thank him for all he does in this House over the last period of time, the last year and 6 months or thereabouts, when the honourable member has been here. He's made a name for himself in his calmness in the chamber, in the way he presents his case, and the day he's done his constituents proud. And I think he should be congratulated for what he's done. The High Arctic may lie far away from our coastline, but the sea lanes, the airspace, the critical undersea infrastructure are fundamental to the United Kingdom's security and economic well-being. With defence, it's obviously about protection. It's about protecting your people. It's about protecting your assets, whether they be around the United Kingdom or further afield. But it's also about economic well-being as well. And I'm very impressed by government's commitment to the defence industries, whether they be in the mainland here, whether they be in Northern Ireland, and I know the Minister has always told us about the commitment, and it's a financial commitment. We've seen that through the commitment to Talis for the weapons and for the cyber activity that we have through Talis and through Spirit. I know government has been keen to build up on that, and after the south east of England, Northern Ireland is, I understand, the next most credible part of the United Kingdom when it comes to cyber security. Again, I welcome that really very, very much, and that's down not just to the companies we have, but also to this government's commitment to that, and we thank them for that. Complacency must never be an option, Madam Chair, so I'm pleased to be able to be here to discuss this issue and see what more we can do to support the High Arctic. I have to say I'm a fair weather person, Madam Chair. I like sunshine and heat. So it's highly unlikely you're going to see me up in Norway or anywhere I got there. I have no interest in going skiing whatsoever. It looks too cold for me. I have to say I enjoyed it on TV at the Olympics, and it was good to see our team doing well. And come within 5 came within 0.2 seconds of winning more medals. So it tells you about the achievement of this wee country that we have, and makes us proud to be British and be part of that. Over the last few days, we have heard all too well the importance of our national security and our infrastructure. My goodness, there's not a day goes by you just don't know what's going to happen next. And that's I'm a man of faith, of course, so I trust in someone better in control, and he's in heaven looking down at us. So I've quite clear in my mind where my faith and my trust is. But this world, I understand there's 67 wars across the world. You know, think about that. 67 wars in the world. Almost a world at war, if we think about it. And we see maybe some of that reflected in the Middle East in the last few days. The high Arctic has proven central to Atlantic security and maritime trade routes, and the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, and the importance of that. Sometimes it's forgotten about. I think the work of members who I know have travelled to Greenland, and some of them who aren't here have travelled to Greenland as well. And I think maybe President Trump's focus on Greenland this last while maybe made us all think the importance of a country that maybe we didn't see just in the same way we should see it. So it's really important that we and thank those members who have been instrumental. And I understand the honourable gentleman himself from Hillsong is going there shortly.
On that point, would you give way?
Absolutely, yes.
Very briefly, and of course we are at risk in our democracy of looking at things in a very short term. But with climate change, if you're looking at 30 years from now, the access to key rare earth minerals and possibly shipping lanes in the far north may have changed considerably.
Again, I thank the Honourable Lady for that intervention, and that's a focus we need to have, because climate change is changing things across the world. We may find ourselves in a slightly different geographical position in a short time, and again, the Honourable Lady very clearly has illustrated that to all our advantage. But also the Greenland, Iceland, UK, we also remain vital for monitoring submarine activity. I can never really understand, Madam Chair, how anybody can get into a submarine. It's too claustrophobic for me, but I admire those who do, and they play a vitally important role in our defence of this great nation. Still seek it also that Russia has expanded its Arctic military footprint, and that's part of the thing. Maybe that's part of what Trump's looking towards as well, but I think we need to be aware of where we are and Russia's input. And especially with Russia with their submarine operations, their air bases, their missile systems. And the Arctic region is a key domain for undersea infrastructure. Protecting the integrity of UK security is of major priority, and NATO allies must remain as a cornerstone of support in doing just that. When we focus upon that and where we are and the importance of it, we support the policies that strengthen deterrence rather than encourage confrontation. And I think I can't remember which president it was. He says, "Speak softly but carry a big stick." It reminds us that sometimes we have to have the deterrent. We have to have the nuclear power. We have to have the deterrence of submarines and others to ensure that we can, by using that strength of that army, that we can persuade others not to go to war, and that's ultimately the goal I think we all try to achieve. We must also maintain readiness to respond to threats and ensure that military deployments to Norway and the North Atlantic are exercised and fully trained. Again, I think we see that our commitment from the British Army and NATO in the three, Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia, and in Poland as well, is something that our troops are the best. Honourable gentleman referred to the Marines. There's nobody just when I was a wee boy. I always wanted to be. I always told people I'm going to be a Royal Marine. I was only about 8 years old at the time, you know. It never happened, by the way. Obviously, never happened. But at 8 years old, that was my big ambition, to be in the Royal Marines. It never happened, but I did serve in part-time in the Ulster Defence Regiment and in the Royal Artillery, so a slightly different role. Not as exciting as the Marines, never would be, but a very incredible role. We've often had the discussion surrounding defence spending, Madam Chair, and a proper budget is needed to perfect intelligence and surveillance of the high Arctic. In strategic terms, it's vital in sea lanes and undersea cables. I can ask the Minister a question in relation to this. There's a select committee came to the main chamber. It must have been about 6 or maybe 8 weeks ago. Forgive me for not being able to remember the exact committee, but they had referred to undersea cables, and I had, in my question to the select committee and the chair, had asked the undersea cables come across from the North Sea down, come into England, come across to Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is a soft belly, Madam Chair, of where do we have a role to play in ensuring that the undersea cables that go from there across the Atlantic as well. I mean, the role is great. Of course, the Republic of Ireland don't have the Royal Navy we have. They don't have perhaps the Army or the personnel that we have. But again, Minister, are there discussions that are undergoing, or is there a relationship, is there defensive agreements between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland to ensure that the undersea cables that go across that direction and across the Atlantic are protected? The chair of the select committee was unable to confirm that. That's a criticism, it's not a criticism, by the way. I'm just saying I asked a question and the answer probably was unable to be given. But the undersea cables and the Arctic stability affects the trade, the energy and global security. And furthermore, the United Kingdom and the United States have shared interests in terms of the Arctic region, and of course President Trump has made his opinions clear in relation to Greenland, but close cooperation ensures that NATO can respond rapidly to threats, particularly from Russia. The United States, as the Honourable Lady referred in her intervention and the Honourable Gentleman referred in his introduction, have bases in Greenland. They have feet on the ground. They have the ability to use that as a protection or a launch pad, whatever it may be. But it's important that we have that relationship. And to conclude, Madam Chair, I stand firmly for a united NATO, a credible deterrent to aggression, and robust investment in our armed forces to ensure they are equipped for operations in the high Arctic. We have an enduring partnership with the United States of America, and I believe we must strengthen our ability to defend vital waters and airspace. And the Honourable Gentleman from Hillzone asked about the number of ships being built by the Royal Navy to enhance the Royal Navy's position. I know the government's committed to enhancement, to investment. That's never in doubt. But maybe the Minister might be able to tell us the commitment that quite clearly needs to be in the Royal Navy. I say this, and I say it incredibly respectfully, Madam Chair. For 10 days, our base in Cyprus was potentially under attack. I ask myself this question, Madam Chair, and respectfully say this, it's not an attack on anybody, but I make this comment. Why on earth did we not send a ship off to Cyprus for the protection 10 days ago? There's something niggles with me, Madam Chair, whenever we see the French and the Germans giving us the protection. I'm happy to, yes.
I'm sure the Minister will respond in her comments, but he will note there are allies of ours in the Mediterranean as well, including a large American flotilla. And it is, of course, appropriate for us to work closely with other air defence assets. So it's not just the single ship that we've sent that would have changed the situation entirely. There are other assets there as well.
The point I'm trying to make is that there's a perception in the world that the United Kingdom, who ruled the waves 300 years ago, or wherever it had been, have not got a base, or haven't got a ship that they can send. It sends a message. And while the Honourable Gentleman is right about you working with your allies, because we can't fight a war on our own anymore, we have to do it collectively. But there's something that niggles me whenever I recognise that today. It's not meant to be attacking anybody. I just make the point that we need to be seen to be proactive as well. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'm grateful to my honourable friend from Howes Owen for this debate and also for his service. And although I haven't served myself, unlike my honourable friend from the opposition, I have been to Norway. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate because last month I spent 5 days in the High North with the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, visiting British Marines, sailors and soldiers training in northern Norway. From my arrival in Tromsø to field exercises in the Makuen training area and aviation operations at Bardufoss, I saw at first hand what Arctic readiness really does mean. It's impossible to witness that work and not conclude that the High North is central to Britain's security. In some of the harshest conditions imaginable, sub-zero temperatures, deep snow, limited daylight, our personnel demonstrated extraordinary mobility, reconnaissance capability and survival skills. They operated seamlessly alongside Norwegian and other NATO allies with professionalism, pride and determination. They understand that what they are doing matters, not just to the alliance, but to the safety and prosperity to the people back home. The High North is not a remote periphery. It is strategically vital. Maritime routes are opening, energy infrastructure is concentrated there, critical undersea data cables that power our digital economy run through those waters. And that is without the impact that we've heard around climate change. As competition intensified, Allied readiness in the Arctic is not optional, it is essential. The government has recognised the realities, as has the First Sea Lord. And Madam Chair, it would be remiss of me, as Vice Chair of the Armed Forces APG, representing the Navy, and as the Member of Parliament for Portsmouth North, not to mention our 2 aircraft carriers, His Majesty's Queen Elizabeth and His Majesty's Prince of Wales. His Majesty's Queen Elizabeth deployed to the High North in autumn 2021 as part of the UK Strike Carrier Group 21 deployment. During this period, she operated in the North Atlantic and near the Arctic Circle and included exercises with Norway and our NATO allies. She returned to northern waters again in 2023 for further NATO and joint exercises focusing cold weather and Arctic operations. And I'm proud to say that when she returned in that 2023, my son was of service on that ship. His Majesty's Prince of Wales deployed to 2022 on a major NATO maritime deployment in the North Atlantic as well, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. She operated again in the northern waters early in 2024, taking part in NATO's large-scale exercise in Norway and the surrounding Arctic region, and we have committed to her returning in the very near future. All evidence that we, as a government and as armed forces, and as the First Sea Lord has said, are taking our national security very seriously. Our national security policy positions the United Kingdom at the forefront of efforts to make NATO stronger, fairer and more effective, and commits us to strengthening our armed forces and protecting our national security in the face of growing threats from our state actors. These commitments are not abstract because they underpin the government's defence investment pledge, agreed with NATO allies to raise defence and security spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, reinforcing our broader national resilience and collective deterrence. The UK's preparations for exercise cold response demonstrates our commitment to NATO and our collective defence. They send a clear signal that we stand shoulder to shoulder with Norway and our allies, and that we are prepared to operate and, if necessary, defend in the most demanding of environments. Since taking office, this government has also doubled down on our strategic posture in the High North, including plans to double the number of UK troops deployed to Norway over the next 3 years to strengthen security in the Arctic and the High North. But readiness, Madam Chair, is not only about kit and capability, it is about people. Alongside observing exercises, I spoke at length with those deployed about welfare, sustainment and the realities of repeated operations far from home. They spoke candidly about separation from their families, about the physical and mental demands of Arctic conditions, and about the importance of clear political direction and sustained investment, as well as about the kit. If we are serious about Arctic readiness, we must ensure that our defence policy reflects operational reality and not assumptions, and we must ensure that our people at home and at abroad get what they need. This means listening carefully to those who deliver the missions, ensuring equipment is fit for purpose, guaranteeing that logistic chains are resilient, and recognising that deterrence begins long before a crisis emerges. It also means we must champion the alliances that make our security possible. Labour's manifesto reaffirmed our absolute commitment to NATO and to ensuring that Britain plays its full part in collective defence. Our Norwegian partners spoke, whilst I was in the High North, about the genuine respect about the capability and reliability of our British forces. Their trust has been built over decades, and partnership and a real shared endeavour. In the High North, they are prepared, professional, and proven that Britain remains a serious and dependable ally. Our responsibility is to match that commitment with our own, to provide the strategic clarity, the resources and the long-term vision that Arctic readiness demands. And I would like to echo my honourable friend's three questions. Honourable friend from Hales-Owen is three questions, and I'd like to add one of my own, a request from service personnel to ask how we are working and when we are working at looking at our troops on the ground into ensuring every day what's often seen as soft materials, their gloves, their jackets, their uniforms, their boots, their body armours, their backpacks. How are we ensuring that they are the best that they can be and that they are listened to so that when we make those procurements, we are making it for real things that happen with real people?
First of our front benchers for the Liberal Democrats, Al Pinkerton.
Thank you, Dr Huck, and as ever, it is a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. And can I thank the honourable and gallant member for Hales-Owen for calling this incredibly geostrategically important debate today and drawing this issue to the attention of the House. At a moment when the world's attention is understandably distracted and drawn to other parts of the world, whether they be brutal wars in Eastern Europe or escalating tensions in the Middle East, it would be all too easy to park an issue such as this to one side and to see it perhaps as something for the future rather than as something for immediate attention. I contend, however, that would be an enormous strategic error if we sought to do that. History, after all, does have a terrible habit of punishing those who overlook the vital importance of geography. And the opening up of the Arctic is undoubtedly one of the most consequential geopolitical shifts of the 21st century. Climate change, as we know, is transforming the region at an extraordinary speed. Retreating sea ice is opening new maritime routes, increasing access to energy resources and critical minerals, and drawing renewed strategic interest from major powers. At the same time, the cooperative governance structures that once defined the Arctic are under strain. For much of the post-Cold War period, the region was described as one of high north, low tension. That description no longer holds. The era of Arctic exceptionalism seems to be over. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has fractured the Arctic Council and accelerated the wider geopolitical tensions that now shape the region. Strategic competition is returning to the High North, not as a distant possibility, but as a clear and present reality. And although the United Kingdom is not an Arctic coastal state, we are undeniably a near-Arctic nation. We are geographically proximate, strategically exposed and directly affected by developments in the High North. Instability in the Arctic affects our maritime approaches, North Atlantic shipping lanes, subsea cables, offshore energy infrastructure and ultimately the deterrent posture of the Royal Navy. The Arctic is not, for the United Kingdom, a remote frontier. It's part of our immediate strategic environment. Now, a few weeks ago, I had the enormous privilege to visit Greenland and Denmark alongside my Liberal Democrat colleague, the Honourable Member for Bicester and Woodstock. And in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, life, I can report, often appears outwardly calm. The harbour is busy, the cafes are full, the rhythms of daily life continue despite the long Arctic winter and the limited daylight of February when I was there. But if you spend any time talking to Greenlanders, you hear something really quite different, a persistent and gnawing anxiety about what might be coming down the tracks. Not from Moscow, not from Beijing. Nobody realistically thinks that either Russia or China pose an immediate threat to Greenland, but extraordinarily from Washington.
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I will give way.
I'm very grateful. He knows a great deal about this subject, and I'm also grateful to the Honourable Member for Hales-Owen for securing this debate. President Donald Trump yesterday suggested that our current Prime Minister is no Churchill. But shouldn't we also add that the current President of the United States is no Franklin D. Roosevelt either? FDR was a big supporter of the development of the United Nations, and he knew about the importance of sovereignty. Does he share my view, I think he will, that it is a matter for Denmark and Greenlanders alone who governs their countries?
I'm grateful to the honourable and gallant gentleman for his intervention. I think that the President of the United States is perhaps more Teddy Roosevelt than Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He seems to be living under the everyday impression that his mission should be to expand US territory and to plant the US flag, no matter how loyal and how allied the country that he has his intentions set upon have been in the past. And indeed, I recall very clearly the deeply offensive remarks that the President of the United States made both about Britain's past military contributions to US international adventurism, but also Denmark's as well. I remember very clearly watching an extraordinary film in the past called Armadillo about the extraordinary work that Danish troops did on the front line in Afghanistan. I agree with the gentleman's comments wholeheartedly. Over the past year, Donald Trump, and it has been a year for Greenlanders, this is not a recent experience. They have been living with the threats of Donald Trump for the best part of 12 months. He's repeatedly suggested that the United States should acquire Greenland, presenting the idea as a matter of American national security. Now, sitting here in Westminster on a morning or an afternoon such as this, it may be tempting to dismiss such remarks as just rhetorical theatre, but in Nook they're experienced profoundly differently. Greenland, as we know, is a self-governing Arctic society of 56,000 people. And when the world's most powerful country repeatedly discusses your homeland as though it were a strategic asset to be acquired, the effect is not abstract. During my visit, we heard accounts of families stockpiling supplies. Some described moving savings abroad in case of financial disruption to their homeland and to their lives. Others spoke of delaying vital and essential medical treatment in Denmark, treatment that many Greenlanders rely on because they feared that any further escalation would mean that they wouldn't be able to return to their homeland after their medical treatment. Greenlandic commentators have described the psychological effect of the campaign of the United States as a form of mental terror. It's a striking phrase, but it captures an important truth. Security in the Arctic is not solely about missiles, submarines, and military installations. It's also about trust, stability, and the ability of societies to live without fear. There's also a profound strategic irony here. The United States already enjoys extensive rights in Greenland under the 1951 US-Denmark Defence Agreement, including the operation of the Patuxent Space Base, formerly the Thule Air Base, and indeed any other base that they may wish to re-establish in the present moment. Greenland sits inside NATO's security architecture through Denmark and benefits from protections of Article 5. The idea that Greenland must somehow be owned in order to be defended simply does not withstand any scrutiny whatsoever. What it does challenge, however, is something far more fundamental: the principle that people are not property and that sovereignty cannot be negotiated away for strategic convenience. Across Greenlandic politics, the response has therefore been consistent and unequivocal. Greenland is not for sale. For liberal democracies, that principle should not be negotiable. Because if Western democracies cannot defend the idea that territories cannot be simply acquired by powerful states, then the rules-based order we claim to uphold begins to look increasingly selective and increasingly fragile. And nowhere are those principles more important than in the wider strategic geography of the North Atlantic. At the heart of that geography lies the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, the naval corridor between Greenland, Iceland and the United Kingdom. During the Cold War, NATO prioritised this corridor in order to detect and constrain the Soviet Northern Fleet submarines departing the Kola Peninsula into the Atlantic. Today, it has once again become central to NATO's strategy. Russia's Northern Fleet must transit through or around the GI-UK gap to reach the North Atlantic. Monitoring this corridor remains essential to tracking submarine activity and protecting the integrity of the North Atlantic. The corridor also safeguards the sea lines of communication between North America and Europe. In any NATO contingency, the transatlantic reinforcement route would pass directly through these waters. If the GI-UK gap were compromised, the United Kingdom's western maritime flank would be exposed. Now, control and surveillance of the space are therefore fundamental to preventing adversaries from projecting power into the North Atlantic or threatening Western Europe and North America. Within this strategic geography, Greenland's importance cannot be overstated. Its location means makes it pivotal to missile early warning systems, Arctic sea routes, North Atlantic access and space-based infrastructure. Destabilising Greenland or undermining Danish sovereignty would fracture NATO cohesion, complicate security in the GI-UK gap and weaken Arctic governance structures at precisely the moment when unity is most needed. The Liberal Democrats are therefore clear. Sovereignty and international law are not negotiable principles. I'm deeply concerned that the Prime Minister has yet to state unequivocally that British soil, British bases and British facilities would never be used to propel American troops onto Greenlandic territory by force. The government must put that matter, in my opinion, beyond doubt. Any suggestion that one NATO ally could coerce another would erode alliance cohesion, weaken deterrence and play directly into the hands of President Putin. Fragmentation in the Arctic theatre would directly benefit Russia's Northern Fleet posture and its wider Arctic military strategy. And again, this is not abstract diplomacy. It's about the credibility of collective defence. The UK must therefore deepen its commitment to Arctic security and North Atlantic resilience. And that means strengthening anti-submarine warfare and maritime domain awareness, investing further in North Atlantic patrol and surveillance capabilities, and reinforcing defence cooperation with our Nordic and Baltic partners. And crucially, the government should invest further in the Joint Expeditionary Force and convene a summit of JEF leaders here in the United Kingdom to address the rapidly evolving security environment in the High North. Because the reality is simple. The Arctic is no longer a peripheral concern. It's at the front line of strategic competition, alliance solidarity and international law. So if I can just leave the Minister with 3 questions. First of all, what concrete steps is the government taking to ensure that the UK is prepared for the reality that I have just outlined? How is the UK strengthening defence cooperation with our Arctic allies, including considering enhanced diplomatic presence in Greenland and perhaps the establishment of a permanent consulate in Nuuk? And finally, the Strategic Defence Review mentions the High North as a space of geopolitical and geostrategic interest, but doesn't offer a defence strategy per se. Does the government intend to bring one forward? And how does the government's future procurement reflect that strategic concern? Thank you.
For the official opposition, Shadow Minister David Reid.
Thank you, Dr Huck, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship today. I just want to start by echoing the Lib Dem spokesperson's initial comments to thank the Honourable Member for Halesowen and fellow former Royal Marine for bringing this debate to the House today. It's a massively important subject, and I'm glad that we're having the opportunity to discuss it. And I hope that we can continue discussing it, because it will be an area that will increase in importance. Now, we all know that the High North is no longer a distant theatre of academic interest or a place for explorers' delight. It's fast becoming the new frontier of great power competition. As the ice retreats through climate change, and we've heard that from many members today, strategic rivalry advances. Sea routes are opening, undersea infrastructure is exposed, and military activity is increasing. The Arctic is no longer insulated by geography or climate, and it's becoming a central arena in the contest between major powers. And the decisions we take now will shape the security of the North Atlantic for decades, and the Honourable Member for Halesowen outlined that very, very clearly in his opening remarks. Russia views the Arctic as a core strategic bastion. Its Northern Fleet operates from heavily defended bases in the region, protecting its nuclear deterrent and projecting power into the North Atlantic. Moscow treats Arctic territory and resources as central to its long-term security and economic resilience. On the other hand, the United States sees the Arctic as integral to homeland defence and the security of the transatlantic alliance. Greenland, which we've heard again today, and the wider North Atlantic have returned to prominence in American strategic thinking as reinforcement routes and early warning systems regain importance. And then lastly, China, though not an Arctic state, they claim that they are a near-Arctic state, whatever that means, has steadily expanded its presence through research, commercial investments and polar shipping, signalling long-term interest in Arctic trade routes and resources, and that will only increase as climate change reduces the ice. It is a theatre where Russian militarisation, American strategic recalibration and Chinese expansion intersects, and that's been laid out very, very clearly by many honourable members today. So that's why NATO now treats defence of the High North as a strategic imperative. The accession of Finland and Sweden has transformed the strategic geometry of the region. Again, another point that the honourable member for Hells-Owen rightly referenced to. NATO's northern flank is stronger and more coherent, and we've seen that over recent years. And another point that the GI-UK gap and the North Atlantic sea lanes, the arteries through which reinforcements would flow in a crisis, have regained their Cold War significance. NATO's launch of Arctic Sentry earlier this year reflects that reality, and I'm glad that that's happened. It signals a recognition that deterrence in the High North must be persistent, coordinated and credible. The United Kingdom says it understands this shift, and going back to 2023, under the last government, we had the policy framework Looking North, which set out a whole-of-government approach across security, science and the environment. And fast-forwarding to this government, we've had the Strategic Defence Review acknowledge the developments in the High North have direct consequence for the Euro-Atlantic and for the United Kingdom's place within it. Ministers have also highlighted the Royal Naval's approach to Atlantic Bastion, intended to secure the North Atlantic through a networked mix of warships, aircraft and autonomous systems. And there are important steps that have been taken. The United Kingdom's strengthened cooperation with Norway through the Lunar House Agreement and organisations through the JEF counter undersea threats and protect NATO's northern flanks. And my old outfit and the honourable members for Hells-Owen, the Royal Marines, continue to train in Norway, including through exercises such as the Cold Response and our training presence at Camp Viking, and that's set to expand. And I just want to put on record my thanks to the Royal Marines and the delegation that came to Parliament very recently under Brigadier Jamie Norman to educate Parliament on the High North. And I think it was a fantastic day and left a lasting impression on all of us. The UK will also contribute to NATO's Arctic Sentry mission, with the Carrier Strike Group deploying to the North Atlantic later this year under Operation Firecrest, a point that was raised by my honourable friend for Huntington, and a point that I hope the Minister can maybe expand on with her closing remarks. Those actions demonstrate intent, but the House must distinguish now, and that's been raised again, between intent and delivery. The Government has chosen not to publish a refreshed standalone High North defence strategy. Instead, Arctic policy has been folded into broader defence frameworks, and I'm sure there's a good reason for that. I look forward to hearing the Minister's rationale for why that's happened. But I think from the other side of the House, and I think if we are playing a good friend to this policy, we do potentially risk diluting focus. If the High North is truly the new frontier of great power competition, then the United Kingdom's objectives there should be clearly defined. As we primarily focus on securing reinforcement routes across the North Atlantic, on protecting critical undersea infrastructure, a point that the honourable member for Strangford referred to, we need a much better strategy across all of our partners, and I think that is being developed, but it's whether or not that's been developed fast enough. I think at present the United Kingdom does maintain it does not maintain capabilities dedicated specifically to Arctic operations, and I think that's been made quite clear today. And I think without the additional capacity, Arctic ambition risks becoming competition for scarce assets rather than sustained strategic commitment. And I think that will be a point that will be acknowledged by anyone that sees themselves as adversaries to us. And I think the Royal Marines are a good sort of microcosm to look through to see this challenge clearly. They're being asked to pivot towards the High North operations, and they are specialists in that environment, whilst continuing special operation roles and global deployments. And I also want to put on record, as my friend for Hells-Owen did, I never actually spent any time in the Arctic. And as a former Royal Marine, it said that until you've spent time in Norway, you're not a proper bootneck. And given that the honourable member for North Portsmouth has spent 5 more days, I think it is, than me in the High North, I will refer to her for her more recent knowledge. The Minister, before we started, though, did offer to join me back up again, which I'm still unsure if that was a threat or some sort of treat. But given that the Honourable Member also wants to join the Royal Marines, maybe we can do it together. Cold weather warfare cannot simply be improvised, and I think the Honourable Member for Hell Owen will know that, having deployed up to the area. Nor can credible specialist capability exist without, again, like he said, the lift, logistics and sustainment that enable it. In the undersea domain, the stakes are even higher. The seabed of the North Atlantic carries the cables and energy links that underpin our economy and communications. And the Honourable Member for Strangford talked about the economic security that we all rely on. Deterrence in the high north will increasingly be measured below the surface, in submarines tracked, cables monitored and infrastructure protected. The Lunar House Agreement with Norway, including cooperation on anti-submarine warfare and the protection of undersea infrastructure, is strategically sound. But the interoperability on paper must translate into persistent operational presence at sea. That means modern anti-submarine capabilities, sufficient hulls available for deployment and the crews required to sustain them. The Strategic Defence Review acknowledged that the Arctic is a region of increasing competition within the United Kingdom's wider neighbourhood, yet it did not outline specific capability adjustment tailored to that theatre. If the High North is becoming central to NATO deterrence, treating it simply as an adjunct to other priorities will not suffice. And again, going back to that overriding point that we keep hearing, I really hope that there is clear detail within the DIP whenever that's released, and I hope that the Minister can give some clearer view on when that will be released. This has also been outlined by the House of Lords. They've already raised concerns that the United Kingdom risks aspiring to meaningful security presence in the High North without the resources to sustain it. Those concerns have not yet been fully answered. Recent events elsewhere also underline the importance for readiness. When crises escalate, forces held at high readiness must deploy rapidly. Air and defence missiles must be integrated, munition stockpiles must sustain operations over time, and the growing cost imbalance between high-end interceptors and low-cost threats cannot be ignored. These challenges go to the heart of credibility. NATO deterrence in the High North depends on the confidence that allies can reinforce Europe across the Atlantic, defend sea lanes and protect the northern flank under pressure. If we speak of Atlantic Bastion, then we must demonstrate the ships, aircraft and trained crews required to make it real. Now, let me be clear. The opposition supports a strong NATO presence in the High North, and we want to work with the government to strengthen this wherever we can. But we cannot support without being a critical friend to some of the plans. So we will ask the government to define clearly the objectives of the United Kingdom's contribution to Arctic Sentry. We will ask how Atlantic Bastion is being resourced and crewed. We will ask how the expansion at Camp Viking will be sustained alongside global commitments, and we will ask how the protection of undersea infrastructure is being operationalised in practice. The High North is becoming the northern gateway to the United Kingdom's security. It is the corridor through which Allied reinforcements would flow. It's where deterrence will increasingly be tested below the surface. If this is the new frontier of great power competition, then we must treat it with the seriousness such a frontier demands. This strategy must be clear, the capability must be credible, and resources must match ambition. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And final substantive speaker for His Majesty's Government, Minister Louise Sander-Jones.
Thank you very much, Dr Huck. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the gallant member for Hales-Owen, for initiating this debate on the high Arctic and its increasing importance to our security, an incredibly important topic. As he knows well from his time as a Royal Marine, the UK has a long and storied history with the High North. And for some 50 years, the Royal Marines have practised Arctic warfare alongside our Norwegian allies. Indeed, the gallant member may have taken part in that rite of passage of plunging into the ice, as I know the First Sea Lord did again when he visited troops there, I believe, only last week. As the threat from Russia has cast an increasingly long shadow over Europe, our High North capabilities have grown only more important. And today, High North deployments of Royal Marines are up 40%, with year-round cold weather operations. Because the reality is we have a front line with Russia in the North Atlantic, and the Russian threat is higher than it has been for decades. We've seen from the activities of the spy ship Yantar, Russia is an increasing threat to our critical underwater infrastructure. We see Putin rapidly re-establishing military presence in the region, including reopening old Cold War bases. And last year, Russia and China conducted their first joint air patrol into the Arctic Circle. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and expanded its icebreaker and research vessel presence. The changing military picture is, of course, fuelled by the changing climate and rising temperatures, and a number of members have very rightly raised how pivotal understanding climate change and recognising the huge threat climate change can pose to our security. It's absolutely vital to consider it as such. The Arctic is warming up 4 times faster than global average, and the Strategic Defence Review projects the region to be ice-free each summer by 2040. Therefore, opening new routes, new trade dynamics, and new flashpoints. Our response to these challenges were set out in the SDR. We need increased investment, new technologies, and stronger alliances. We are prepared to meet these challenges. Spearheading our capabilities is our Littoral Response Group North, our specialised Royal Navy task group that deploys across the North Atlantic, the Baltic and the High North, with dedicated personnel, ships and helicopters to project power and respond to crises. And indeed, we have launched Atlantic Bastion, which is our groundbreaking programme to protect the UK from Russian undersea threats using an AI-powered network of sensors. And we are working ever more closely with our 9 partner nations who make up the Joint Expeditionary Force. We established Operation Nordic Warden with Jeff allies, together working to track threats to undersea infrastructure and Russia's shadow fleet, a responsibility now assumed by NATO. And last autumn, we conducted Exercise Terrassus, Jeff's largest ever military exercise, involving more than 17 British personnel, alongside air, land and naval forces from Scandinavian and Baltic nations. And last month, the Secretary of State, on our visit to Norway, went further still. Arctic and High North security will be strengthened against rising Russian threats as Britain steps up its presence in the region. He announced a major Joint Expeditionary Force exercise, Exercise Lion Protector. This will mean Jeff air, land and naval forces across Iceland, Danish Straits and Norway, which will see air, land and naval forces from Jeff nations trained to protect critical national infrastructure from attacks and sabotage and enhance their joint command and control capabilities. And he confirmed that the number of British troops deployed to Norway will double over 3 years from 1,000 to 2,000 personnel. Turning to NATO, Finland and Sweden's accession has transformed NATO's northern posture, meaning 7 of the 8 Arctic states are now NATO allies, and the whole alliance is consequently more focused on the threats and challenges to our north. And as you would expect from a government that has put NATO first, NATO is at the heart of our response to growing threats and tensions in the region. The UK is playing a full part in NATO's Arctic Sentry mission that is enhancing NATO's posture in the Arctic and High North, and we currently have 1,500 commandos deployed across Norway, Finland and Sweden as part of exercise Cold Response. Planning is at an advanced stage for Operation Firecrest, and the upcoming deployment will see our carrier strike group across the North Atlantic and High North. Of course, we do continually review threat levels and will change our policies accordingly. With thousands of personnel from all these 3 services spearheaded by HMS Prince of Wales and parts of the deployment under NATO command. Our military cooperation in the Arctic is underpinned by key bilateral partnerships that have all been strengthened under this government. Russia's growing activity across the Arctic, High North and North Atlantic has changed the security picture for the region. The UK, with its 50-plus year of history of operating in the Arctic and through our deep partnerships with allies including Norway, Sweden and Finland, will be at the centre of NATO's northern response from day one. With Norway, the Defence Secretary signed the historic Lunar House Agreement in December, which will see the UK and Norway jointly operate a fleet of submarine hunting Type 26 warships to expand joint Arctic training and pre-position British military equipment in Norway to be better prepared for future crises. And we have stood resolutely with Denmark over Greenland, whose future is for Greenlanders and Danes alone. And I welcome the uplift in Danish Arctic defence spending worth more than £10 billion. We've also worked very closely with the Finnish military, including through NATO Exercise Dynamic Front, with the British Army conducting its first live firing of our Archer mobile howitzer on Finnish soil. Army getting in on the High North joy. And we do currently have 3 P-8 Poseidon aircraft carrying out RAF NATO air policing from Keflavik in Iceland, which is the largest ever P-8 overseas deployment. Turning to a couple of questions that some of the honourable members have asked me. Regarding the DIP, I know that we are working flat out to deliver, and I'm sure I do not need to stress to every member here that it is important to get this hugely important piece of work right before we commit to it. And to note that T-31, of which we have ordered 5, HMS Venturer should be the first of those to deliver by the end of the decade. Turning to just a couple of other points, the Honourable Member for Strangford raised Ireland, and I know that the PM is due to meet with the Taoiseach at the bilateral in just a few days' time. And I know that the Secretary of State for Defence will call his counterpart and have discussions as well around some of the points that he has raised. I would also like to thank the Honourable Member for Portsmouth North, who has been to Norway. I have never even made it to Norway. I've only been as far as Denmark. But I'm sure there is time to rectify that. But she is a doughty campaigner for families. And as we say in the military, although personnel join the military, it is their families that serve too. And I know it is within my purview to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support families through the very difficult challenges when their loved ones do deploy. She rightly notes the importance of the larger pieces of shiny equipment that we must procure, but also how important simple items such as gloves are. Having worn military-issue gloves, I do concur. We must make sure we have a good standard of personal protective kit and equipment. There has been real tribute paid to the mighty Royal Marines, who have quite rightly been excellent guardians of our Arctic warfare capability. This is a very difficult operating environment, and I want to pay tribute to those who do so on our behalf to keep us safe. I think they are a fantastic career choice for those who are considering starting their careers or those who might be interested in joining the reserves. But I would just say other armed services are available, like the British Army, should you be interested. To close then, politically and environmentally, the Arctic is in flux. And whilst the eyes of the world are indeed currently focused on the Middle East, we are clear that there can be no national security and no global security without security across the Arctic and Northern Europe.
I'm grateful. In its negotiations with the United States, Denmark has pledged to raise defence spending from 2.4% of GDP last year to 3% of GDP this year and next. Does she think that that example that Denmark is setting is a good one for the United Kingdom?
The Honourable Member for his question, and I'm very proud of the steps that this government has taken to raise defence spending, which is very welcome off the back of many years of underspend. And in fact, my very next line, rising to 2.6% in 2027, 3% in the next Parliament and 5% by 2035. I think just as important as raising the defence and security spending is making sure that we continue to pursue that NATO-first defence policy. So we are a government delivering the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War to keep Britain secure at home and strong abroad. I was about to say thank you, but you just got it.
Very briefly, I greatly appreciate that she's talking about defence spend, but the point I raised in an intervention was in relation to a consulate, because many of our European neighbours are ensuring that they have a presence alongside, of course, China and the United States. It surely is time that when we're looking at spending government money effectively for the future of the UK's best interests, that would be a very effective way of doing that too.
Thank the Honourable Member for posing that question. I'm sure she will understand that consulates are a matter for the FCDO, but I will make sure that they are aware of her comments. Thank you.
Yeah. In that case, we go to Alex Ballinger to wind up.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huck, and thank you for so many excellent contributions throughout the day from the members for Portsmouth, Strangford, Dwiffer, Merioned, Dunfermline and Dollar, Surrey Heath, Exmouth and Exeter East, and of course from the Minister. I think this is the first debate I've been in where there's almost been unanimous agreement across the piece about the importance of Arctic security. Our outrage at the position the Americans took on Greenland and the necessary steps we need to take to reinforce the capability of our troops. So thank you everyone for contributing, and I'm also grateful to hear so much about the Royal Marines being spoken about in the Chamber. It's something that we need to continue in the future. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered government policy on NATO and the high Arctic. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order, order.